Good morning. What we're going to do this morning is just take a few minutes to go over the Safe Sanctuary policy as it's been rewritten. Part of the policy itself is that all those who are working with our young people take an orientation training as part of this. We're obviously recording it for those that aren't going to be able to be here. So, but I do want you to be able to invite you to share any questions that you have, any thoughts you have, scenarios that may come up, so that we can take and address them. Joe and I have been working on this for some time and have tried to incorporate as many of those scenarios as we can, but you may still have some that we need to be aware of that we need to address, and hopefully we'll be prepared to give you an answer on that. We're going to go work our way back and forth. Joe will have some areas of the policy that he'll talk about. I'm going to talk about some others, and hopefully we'll move along quite quickly through this. As we come to an end, we will briefly walk through the first floor to make sure you're aware of some of the things that we have here. So I'm going to just let Joe start, and feel free at any point to offer a question or suggestion along the way.
Good morning. Thanks for everyone for coming this morning. The way the policy breaks down, some of you have copies in front of you, others will get those copies to you. But I'm going to kind of run through the first section of the policy, which is kind of the guts and the baseline procedures that Charlie and I and the group that has prepared this have tried to put together for purposes of these are the expectations and these are the goals that we have as a church in order to minimize the risk of having a problem. One of the first procedures is what we refer to as the two-advisor rule, which means just what it says, which is when we have an activity with children or youth, we have to have at least two advisors. Now let me pause for a minute and talk a little bit about definitions. An advisor is someone who has gone through the training, someone who's submitted their paperwork, which all of you will have been by the end of this morning, and is over the age of 18, which again I think we're going to be safe on. The basic idea is the underlying situation that we're seeking to avoid in Safe Sanctuaries is having a case where we have one adult with one youth. And that's, if you kind of keep that idea in your mind, that's the paradigm scenario we're trying to keep away from. So there are certainly situations where the two-advisor rule gets pressed a little bit. For example, you're in one of the Sunday school rooms and you're with younger kids and someone needs a bathroom. The couple ways that we try to address that are, number one, on some occasions in the Sunday school situation, we're going to have Sandy or others available kind of in a floating situation around the building so that if someone's short temporarily, they can fill in the gap. Another thing which we'll come back to in a few minutes is we're going to utilize youth who can assist as just basically youth assistants who can help out in a short-term basis to assist with bathroom breaks and so forth. They're not qualified as advisors, but they can help us out and kind of address that problem on a short-term basis. The other thing I'll mention about the two-advisor rule and how it affects with bathrooms is for those who are younger, who don't have, who may need some assistance, what you want to do if they're using the small bathroom in what I'll call the nursery room in the back. Some of you know there's kind of a scaled down bathroom in there. Some of you may not have noticed that over the summer that door has been cut into a Dutch door, so it has two half doors. The idea being that you keep the bottom half closed and the top half open for purposes of you have to be in there to assist a child. Again, that's a way of addressing the Safe Sanctuary problem of 101. If someone has to go into the larger bathroom down the end of the hall here, and they have to assist, the recommendation would be you leave the doors open. As you know, the way that bathroom is configured, the toilet is actually set back in the kind of in an alcove back there, so it's not like you're going to really be too damaging to the privacy of the children. And the truth of the matter is, those who are young enough and need help with the bathroom really aren't all that concerned about their personal privacy. So that really is kind of the heart of To Advisor. Charlie, is there anything in that you would add?
Yeah, one of the questions that came up is, in our previous training was, well, how does that go with driving? If you happen to be in a driving situation. The key to that is you don't want to be in a car with just one young person. If you have in the car, which is normally the case, 2 or 3 young people, it's the mere fact of numbers is the protection. Most of the time, abuse takes place one-on-one. So there is power in numbers. So the key to the To Advisor rule is, for the most part, you never want to be by yourself with a young person. If we're running an event and you're waiting for a child to be picked up, make sure another adult is staying there with you. It happens, for example, in youth group quite often. We're waiting for a parent to show up. Well, if Vicky's here, I'm going to stay here with her until all the children are picked up. And again, it's for their protection as well as ours. We don't want to leave ourselves vulnerable. You don't want to be in a situation where it becomes he said, she said. You have to be in a position where we want to protect one another and certainly protect our children as well. If you happen to see somebody in a one-on-one situation, go over and stand outside the door or make sure your presence is there if needed, as best we can. If you are in that one-on-one situation and there are other people around, it is doors open, make sure it's as visible as it can be. And certainly Sunday school, you're going to look for help, Sandy, or open the door to make sure other people are aware, you may need some help. It gets touchy. I think last time Sharon brought up the fact where, what do we do with the nursery first hour? Because quite often it is one nursery person with 1 or 2 very young children. We're going to have to address that. That's going to have to go back to SPR and say, we need to get a youth in there to assist. We need a second person, which we need to, either that or say we're not going to be in that position, from 9 to 10 o'clock. We can't offer that anymore because we can't provide a safe sanctuary situation for the children. Again, it's as much for their protection as it is for yours. You don't want to be in a position where something, happens, and it can be very innocent, but you're by yourself. So we need to just all work together. This is a team issue that we need to work on.
Thanks. One of the things that many of you, I'm sure, have noticed is on the first floor, all the classroom doors have had windows cut into them and installed. That's an element of the safe sanctuary policy, which has really already largely been implemented on this floor. We've talked about doing that maybe on the second floor and perhaps in the fellowship room. If you don't have a door that is equipped with a window, leaving the door open is probably the practical alternative here. A corollary to the To Adult rule is the 5 years older rule, which is, again, as it sounds, we don't want to have situations where there's a 19-year-old advisor counseling 16-year-old youth. We think that's a problem, and there's obvious concerns that can arise in that kind of a scenario. So we're going to make that, we incorporate that concept into the Safe Sanctuaries policy. I had mentioned earlier, although I was struggling for the right term, we refer to the youth who can assist as aides to the advisor. And the aides are to be pre-approved by pastor. We're looking at really aides from the age of 14 to 18. They are not to be left with the kids solely in charge, but their role is, one would suspect, is to assist. For a short-term basis, yeah, they can fill in. Yes, they can help with taking someone to a bathroom, but their role is to be secondary in an assisting role. The only other real element or cornerstone of the Safe Sanctuary policy is the idea of notice to the parents. While we're going to fill out some forms as advisors here. The children, as they begin Sunday school and move into the Sunday school season, will fill out forms which will give the basic contact information. They will also authorize, on a short-term basis, the ability to leave the church property in the context of a regular youth activity. But the other thing that can happen and does happen with some frequency here is kids will either stay here overnight, or they'll go off the church property for an extended period of time. Not like running to Walmart to buy supplies to fill backpacks, but like to go to, I don't know, mini golf or Ocean City or something. In those situations, the policy we've established is we're going to require that advance notice be given to parents of those activities and a permission slip to be completed and returned before the youth can participate. We anticipate there's going to be some bumps and bruises with that process, because someone's not going to have a form filled out. Someone's going to show up that day and say, well, I don't have it, or whatever, and we're going to have to make judgment calls. But I think our general idea is we're going to try to maintain firmness on that and tell people, look, I'm very sorry, but A, the forms went home with you, B, they were emailed to you, C, they're available on the website as we speak right now. At that time they will be, at least. And we're just going to try to enforce that, because that really is the kind of situation where there's real risk. And we want to be clear in that, and we want to be consistent in that policy.
We've also, through our last discussion, are going to, I think, bring to council the idea that any trips that are organized by the church, if they're off-site, similar forms be filled out even by adults. Because one of the things that we realized is, God forbid something happen, well, we need to be able to know who people's doctors are, the dentists are, who their contact people are, so that in an emergency, you know, we always think, well, we got to be able to get in touch with the parents, but think about for ourselves, if something were to happen and, you know, there was somebody else on the trip, well, I don't know how to get in touch with Julie's next of who does she want me to contact, or who her doctor is, or if she's brought to the hospital. One of the things, you know, they'll start treating her, but they want to know doctors, dentists, insurance, whatever. So we're going to try to almost incorporate that, not say permission slip, but that kind of thing for everybody as we try to organize trips. The general form is the fact that, for example, one of our upcoming youth meetings will be what's called Destination Unknown, where we may take the kids only for part out to, let's say, a cemetery, do a devotional or a little programming thing there, and then come back to the church. To try to make permission slips every single time we do it is going to be really cumbersome. But if we can make what we call a general permission slip, and there's a copy, an example of that in your paperwork, they can fill it out once, we'll keep it on file. We have it available so that we can do a trip to ShopRite to shop for the food pantry, or to Walmart to get backpack stuff. We'll still let the parents know this is happening, but we're not going to necessarily require every single time a permission slip for those kind of events. More so long-term, longer kind of trips like Ocean City, Keswick, if we're going a ski trip, those kind of things where we're going for a longer period of time.
Or overnight.
Or for sure anything that's overnight.
Yeah, the way we tried to draw that distinction in the policy, as some of you will see, is basically if there's the youth group hour, hour and a half. If the event occurs within that time frame, that's a regular event. If it's going to be longer than that or overnight, then it's a special event, is how we drew the distinction. Well, those few elements really are the guts of the operational part of the policy. That's the stuff that we do to keep ourselves safe. The thing that Charlie's going to talk about next is what if a problem arises. So Charlie, why don't you run through those scenarios, please?
In their forms, if you come into the back of your booklet, you'll begin to see there are forms in there for reporting. There's two distinctions that have to be made in terms of abuse. First off, just as a general, is that we are required. This isn't well, I don't know, maybe I don't. If you suspect and have a reasonable expectation that a child has been abused, we have an obligation by law to make a report to, and I'm going to use DIFUS. I know it now has a new anagram, but we are obligated to make that phone call to say we suspect that a child has been abused. Now, there's 2 points for us to be aware of. One, if it's a child comes in and let's say to Sunday school and says something, or we look and wow, it really looks like this child has been abused, or says something that leads us to make a reasonable conclusion that this child has been abused, you need to very simply call DIFUS and start the wheels in motion. It makes no difference whether it's, wherever you suspect it, that's what you need to do. Whether a child comes into your home or into a church program, if you suspect abuse, you're obligated to make that phone call and get that wheels going. Throughout, your obligation is to keep some records. We've made some forms for you. They're in your, again, in your paperwork. Make the phone call, who you called, who you spoke with, what your conversation entailed. And then follow what DIFUS tells you to do. One of the things, first and foremost, is keep the child safe. If they're very upset, get somebody to come in and help with the rest of the children, remove that child, make sure they're safe and protected. And that is a scenario that you deal with, and it may be triggered by the child coming into the church. It is not a church problem, okay? It's not going to trigger a lot of other things within the life of the church. It's really now an extension of the outside world. Now let's come that you suspect that something has happened to a child while they were here, involved in a ministry of some sort, whether it's kids club, Sunday school, youth group. You have a reasonable suspicion that something has happened to a child while they were here. They come back and they're very upset and they said, so-and-so just blah, blah, blah. That scenario is much different. Your number one thing is to make sure the child is safe, and now you need to continue to make the call to DIFUS. It's your responsibility to make that call. Right after you've done that, if they tell you to call the police, you've done that, your next phone call is going to be to me, okay? But what the important thing is, now it's within the life of the church, and we need to deal with it as a church. The Penn State scenario fell apart because the individual who saw something, heard something, suspected something, did not take the responsibility to make the call. They brought it to somebody else. Then they took and made a decision. The error, by the way, in our conference sample policy, when Joe and I looked at it, what really became clear to us is it put all the pressure on the pastor to make a decision whether to make a call to DIFAS. And if you think about it, unless I see it firsthand, I'm dealing with secondhand information. Your interpretation of what you heard or what you saw, and now I have to make a decision not only on what the source is, but what your perception is. And yeah, now it almost can become into that trap of saying, well, I want to protect our church, so maybe I'll just try to deal with it and see what it is and sweep it under the carpet. What we've done is said we're not taking that step. What we're doing is saying the person has a reasonable expectation that this has occurred, make the phone call. I'll deal with, once I'm informed about it, I'm the one that will make the phone call to the parents to try to take and deal with it. I need to make phone calls to the district superintendent. I'm going to have to make a phone call to the insurance company. I'm going to need to make phone calls to church leaders so that they're aware of the situation. I'll have to deal with the person that the accusation is against. Your job is to make the report. In every phone call you'll see on the form asks you to take in what time was it, who did you speak with, time, date, who did you speak with, also to take and briefly summarize your conversation. And I'm going to be doing the same thing. The importance of this, and again, think about Penn State. We now have a paper trail of everything that has happened and how we dealt with this case, this situation. So there's a very openness to it, very transparent, but very factual. We can come back and say, this is how we dealt with this situation. I'm going to be doing the same thing. You'll see that there's forms for me to fill out doing the same thing, every person I talk to.
For those of you who have the paperwork in front of you, the form is on page 13, the abuse forms.
Okay. And I think Joe can address this, in terms of there is a legal aspect to this, and why don't you just share the two rules?
Sure, and this also is reproduced on page 6 of the policy. There's really two separate elements under the New Jersey law applicable to these situations. The first one is the one that Charlie has already discussed, which is under New Jersey law, if a person knowingly fails to report suspected abuse or neglect, it's a disorderly persons offense. It's a criminal violation. There's a fine, there's imprisonment, there are real sanctions for someone who, again, whether it's in your next door neighbor, whether it's something you see in a parking lot, or whether it's something you see in the church. New Jersey law imposes an affirmative obligation upon adults to notify authorities when they see child abuse. The corollary to that, continuing on, is let's assume you're a person who thinks they see something. You call DIFAS. Then later on you testify at a hearing or something happens and it turns out that the allegation of abuse is unfounded. What you saw, you misinterpreted, you were mistaken, whatever it was. You have immunity under New Jersey law from civil or criminal liability because you made a good faith effort to prevent what you thought was child abuse. That's the protection offered by New Jersey law to encourage people to do the right thing. As Charlie had mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do is we want to get the child safe. We want to get the person who's accused, not in a confrontational manner, but get them out of the situation. And then we want to notify DIFAS and begin the machinery rolling as is reflected in the forms at the back of the policies and procedures. That's the essence of the mechanism that we've tried to create.
What questions, thoughts do you have? I mean, to some extent, you've all been involved with kids here. What are some situations that, as you hear what we've talked about, you could sit back and say, yeah, that's all well and good, but what are the situations or possibilities of problems that we need to be aware of?
When you have someone that's your second person for whatever your event is, they have to have all of this background check as well. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, for it to be an advisor, the definition is they've gone through the background
Okay.
check and they've completed the forms to be an advisor, yes.
And I'm going to say, use the term, is a regular helper. For example, let's use Kids Club as an example. Holly and Amy have an event for a Kids Club. Both of them should have their background checks, have the training, but a mom wants to stay and help out. For me, that's not the same kind of level. It's a mom staying to help out with other kids. I'm going to say regular helpers, that becomes important. For example, our trip to OCC, we're going to ask that if a youth is going, that all who are part of that trip have the training. Because it's overnight, it's long-term, there are many more scenarios that can creep in. So we need to make sure that that's, again, a safe place. The idea for me is people who are regularly helping. For example, Vacation Bible School, when it comes, we have many adults who come in and help. I think what we probably will do next year is, as one of our gatherings for Vacation Bible School, we need to take and briefly go through, the safe sanctuary issues and, avoid one-on-ones, and we'll have that same kind of training. Do we do background checks on every single person No, because again, I think there's such a multitude of people helping, and we have additional, 3, 4 adults or aides helping in every scenario. We're safe, and the children are safe. But as a regular basis, we need to make sure people are there. Our Sunday school teachers who are teaching on a regular basis need to have training in the back.